Hi, this is Eternal King here, bringing you another LOR video today. So coming off my 7 Souls victories in the Shadow of the Erdtree Elden Ring content, often considered to be the hardest video game content available right now, I thought I'd do a quick review of all the top weapons for each category that I think can help make the game easier for you. First up for Daggers, Reduvia is a core game weapon that allows you to proc bleed at a distance and is therefore one of the best daggers in the game. It was before the DLC and it is after the DLC as well. What you want to know is that the 50 bleed status that you see here actually scales up with your arcane stats. So the more points you pump into arcane, the more bleed damage you'll be doing to bosses. Next up, we have straight swords. One of the best straight swords in the game is still Sword and Knight of Flame. So Sword and Knight and Flame has a ranged weapon art that can either deal magic damage or fire damage. And it has split scaling between intelligence at faith at B level at max rank. So I would highly recommend the straight sword over many of the others. In terms of its damage flexibility, you will find an upgrade in the DLC, and we will go over that later. But in terms of core game content, Sword of Night and Flame will get you all the way through until, past Mog, Lord of Blood, into the DLC, and then you can upgrade from there. We're talking about Greatswords and the Greatsword class of weapons. One of the best Greatswords in the game right now is Greatsword of Solitude. So Greatsword of Solitude, you'll see this all over Arena, which is Elden Ring PvP. And you're looking at A scaling in strength, D scaling in dexterity, and a great ranged weapon art that shoots out a wind projectile, and then you can follow it up with a melee slash. Very good greatsword, like all-rounder strength weapon. Very, very good, and it's my top pick for greatswords. So you can pick this up as soon as you kind of like one of the first bosses in the DLC. You can grab this, and I would recommend doing so. Talking about colossal swords, my top pick for colossal swords is going to be the default greatsword. The default greatsword, you get it early on in Caelid and core game, and it can carry you through all of Elden Ring. If you look at its values, things like cold damage, poison damage, bleed damage, it scales very well with status effects, despite being a colossal weapon. It also has A scaling in strength for raw damage, or, as a quality weapon, it's also quite solid at BB. BB is much higher than what you usually get out of a quality weapon. Talking about the next weapon category, we have thrusting swords. Thrusting swords are a pretty sweet weapon category. My top pick for thrusting swords is the new Carrion Sorcery Sword. The Carrion Sorcery Sword allows you to cast spells as if it was a staff. But obviously it's not a staff, it's a sword with S intelligence scaling. So you can basically vary from, poking something with your rapier to casting a spell with one click of a button. So that's quite good for a simple rapier, to have that kind of flexibility and power. Going on to heavy thrusting swords, we are talking about, I think for my top pick, it's probably Bloody Helus. It's very close between Bloody Helus and Sword Lance, but I'm going to give it to the Bloody Helus just because it has a weapon art called Dynast's Finesse, which allows you to iframe through attacks. So if you don't know, iframes in Elden Ring are very important. They allow you to completely negate damage if you time a dodge properly. Well, this weapon lets you do that inherently in its kit, while also putting out really good bleed damage. Talking about curved swords. Curved swords are got a lot of new options in the DLC. My top pick for curved swords is Dancing Blade of Renaud, which was added in the most recent DLC content. It has A scaling in dexterity, and it has a never-ending chain attack for its weapon art. So as long as you keep mashing L2, she'll keep dancing and slicing, or you'll keep dancing and slicing, and basically racking up that damage and that multi-hit counter. Moving on from curved swords to great curved swords, we are talking about For my top pick, it's probably default game Bloodhound's Fang. So anyone who's played Elden Ring before at all knows that you can get this weapon very early on, and it is one of the best quality weapons in the game. It scales with a CB. It's very good. And while its bleed damage will never increase off of your stats, 55 is enough in this case to be useful. And it has an amazing iframe weapon art. And it's just a highly evasive weapon art in general, and it covers a great deal of distance. So it never stops being useful, even into the DLC. Top picks for katanas. We have the... Katanas are interesting. I would actually recommend the washing pole. So this is... people who played Dark Souls 1 knows that there is a long katana that exists in all of these games, and in this game is called the Nagakiba, and it's just as good in this game as it was in all the other Souls games. It's just a katana that is longer than all other katanas. There's no reason why you wouldn't want that range advantage with a weapon that slices as quickly as this. And of course, A scaling and dexterity makes this very good for dex builds. You could build an entire character just around Nagakiba with Keen Infusion and using whatever weapon art you want. It's very strong. I actually soloed Melania with the Nagakiba on my dex build. Talking about twin blades. Twin blades are pretty sweet. My top pick for twin blades is the Godskin Peeler. Godskin Peeler scales with the Keen Infusion will scale with A and dexterity, which is very good for a twin blade to have that kind of scaling. And also, it has modified R2s, so its R2 charge attacks have a multi-hit flurry that is unique to the Godskin Peeler, and that makes it my preferred choice. Of course, fully customizable with whatever weapon ash or Ash of War you want to use. Moving on to axes, we have my top pick, which is the new Smith Script axe. So one of the things they add in the DLC, if you don't know, is throwing weapons. So never before seen in Elden Ring are weapons that you can just huck and throw at enemies and otherwise function entirely like every other melee weapon in the game. When it comes to PvE content, throwing weapons are amazing. PvP content, not as much, but just for PvE content, like the DLC, having that range punish opportunity for certain boss strings is very good. You can just roll away, throw an axe out when you want to, and punish attacks you couldn't punish otherwise. Moving on to greataxes. My top pick for greataxes is going to have to be the classic Axe of Godric. You get this off the first Great Rune world boss, or, Legacy Dungeon boss, Godric the Golden. And it actually scales exceptionally well into DLC content. It has a CC and strength and dex scaling, and its weapon art is exceptionally powerful. When you get all of the Shadoo fragments and you're scaling up your attack power in the DLC, it just so happens that certain weapon arts scale very well, and this is one of them. Next up we have hammers, so your mace category of weapons, and I would recommend Ringed Finger. Ringed Finger, using its Claw Flick weapon art, will allow you to hard knock down phantoms and invaders and things of that nature. If you don't know, in the DLC there are these things called mausoleum fights, where you have to one-on-one a phantom, an NPC phantom that has a lot of HP. And so using something like Claw Flick to hard knock down those phantoms every time they try to be, aggress towards you, try to hit you with a jumping attack or whatever, and you're just claw flicking them to the ground over and over again, that's going to give you a lot of time to take the pressure off and heal up and whatever you have to do. Next up, we have Flails. In terms of the top flail, it is Knight Rider Flail. Knight Rider Flail has A scaling at Keen Affinity, and it has 50 bleed buildup as well. So you can put whatever weapon art you want. Something with multi-hit is probably best, so you can rack up that bleed damage. But even just the base damage for a flail is very good with this level of scaling. Next up, we have Great Hammers. So, best Great Hammer from my perspective. Good question. I would probably go Smith Script. The Smith Script Great Hammer is very strong. It is a throwing Great Hammer that you can hold up and with your R2 and charge it, and you'll just spin around and then throw the hammer at enemies, and it hard knocks down phantoms and things like that at range. It's exceptionally powerful. Works really well with a heavy affinity at A scaling. So you're having an A scaling throwing weapon, like that's nuts with strength. Very, very strong. Next up, we're gonna do colossal weapons. Top colossal weapon for me is going to be, I think, Giant Crusher. So I call it Giant Smasher. It is the Pancake Hammer. So it has S scaling and strength, which is the highest level of scaling you can have on a weapon. And the AR in the DLC is insane, which is the raw attack power. It can go up to something like 2,000 in the DLC with Shadoo fragments. And that means that you're dealing, with every jumping attack that you're doing, you're going to be dealing a ton of damage. You're also going to be poise breaking bosses and being able to hit them with a critical hit and stagger them and knock them down and things like that. In terms of spears, I highly recommend the new Swift Spear. So if you don't know, the Swift Spear is new to the DLC. It has a unique R1 chain combo and X dexterity scaling. There is no spear in the game that has S dexterity scaling and also has multi-hit R1 chains. So exceptionally powerful for spears. No real competition there. Giant spears or great spears. There's a lot of interesting new options. I am going to go Spear the Impaler. So Spear the Impaler, if you don't know, is Mesmer's Spear. It is both a throwing weapon and it has a crazy multi-hit Ash of War. So again, B scaling and dexterity, C scaling and faith, that's really good. Jacking up that physical and fire damage, while also being able to be thrown at, a great distance and using a weapon art that is just like pure anime nonsense. Very good. Next up, we're going to be looking at Halberds. In terms of the best Halberd, it is Knight Rider Glaive. So if you don't know, this is a core game weapon that has currently S scaling and strength. Having a Halberd with S scaling is insane because Halberds are naturally long weapons. So when you combine the natural length of a polearm with high damage scaling, it's great. It's a great PvP weapon as well for roll catches and things like that. So I absolutely love Knight Rider Glaive. Moving on from Halberds, we have Reapers. The best Reaper to me is going to be Grave Scythe. So you get this off the skeleton enemies, and the great thing about Grave Scythe is that it has the highest natural AR out of all scythes in the game. It also has the highest weight, but again, that matters less. So you can infuse it a lot of different ways. You can infuse it with an element, something like magic damage. You can infuse it with, again, keen, and it's going to have a B in dexterity. You can infuse it heavy, it'll have a B in strength. But best option would be quality, where you have B and B in strength and dexterity. So something like a 50-50 build with the Grave Scythe and the Ash of War of your choice is going to be very, very strong. Whips. I highly recommend the new Tooth Whip. If you don't know, the Tooth Whip has a unique Ash of War called Painful Strikes. It's like a multi-hit whip chain attack, and it also has passive poison buildup, and it is deadly poison as well, which means it does extra damage than regular poison. And the dex scaling's fine at B. It's not bad, and there's also a little bit of strength scaling in there as well. Moving on from whips, we are on fists. In terms of the best fist weapons, probably Hidden Needle. So it is Hidden Needle. If you don't know, sleep buildup is low-key kind of OP in the DLC right now. And what this weapon art does, and again, if you look at the scaling, you can entirely ignore this. It almost doesn't matter. But what the weapon art does, Sleep Evermore, is basically pops sleep for extra damage. So whenever someone Falls Asleep, which you kind of can build up through a variety of methods. You use the weapon art, and that's going to do a lot of extra damage to enemies that you've already proc sleep on. And it can sometimes one-shot in PvP. Like, it's very strong. It's like a two-shot, more or less. And for a fist weapon that weighs like 1.5 pounds or whatever it is, 0.5 pounds, it's ridiculous. Moving on from fists, we are on to claws. Top pick is going to be Claws of Night. Pretty much without competition. Claws of Night is similar to all of the Smith script weapons, where it is a throwing weapon. So if you see that the skill is Scattershot Throw, and the full stats aren't updated yet on the wiki because the DLC is still fairly new, but once the stats are updated, I'll show you those. But it's a very good throwing weapon, and I assume the dex scaling gets up to about an A. If it starts out as a C, chances are it's an A by the time it's fully leveled, if not an S. So that's insane for a claw weapon. So yeah, Claws of Night being the new ranged claw. It's all basically dagger throws. It's very good. We can move on to the new weapon categories now, because that's kind of something people are going to be interested in. Talking about the DLC introduced a lot of new weapon categories. One of them is thrusting shields. Top pick for thrusting shields is the Carrion thrusting shield, because it naturally has a massive amount of magic negation, while essentially being a weapon. Like, it's not a shield, it's a weapon. If you're using a thrusting shield, you're using it aggressively, and you are attacking people with it. A lot of interesting scaling options here just because of the fact that it has natural intelligence scaling, and also, can be a dexterity scaling weapon at an A. Like, that's pretty good. Magic scaling is only a B, but that's kind of deceptive. It's a lot of magic damage at the end of the day. And occult will scale at an A, and arcane, it's going to be a lot of arcane damage, which, it's just physical damage, but you're scaling off of arcane. No matter how you slice it, the Carrion Thrusting Shield, for only 10 pounds, is a very good aggressive style shield, where you're actually attacking with it in 4-hit combos, and not necessarily blocking with it. But most of the the attacks with the shield have blocking frames, so you're kind of blocking and attacking at the same time. Moving on to hand, so, the Kung Fu weapon class that everyone's really excited about and having a lot of fun with right now. So the top Kung Fu weapon is Dane's Footworks. I'm going to call it Dane's Foot Wraps, because that's what it is. You're wrapping your feet so you can kick people really, really hard. A heavy scaling is really good for a weapon, so you can go pure strength and just punch things and kick things and do flying kung fu kicks and all sorts of things, tornado kicks, and it's just a good time. It's a lot of fun. So that's the top hand-to-hand weapon. For throwing blades, we only get the one option, which is Smith's Script Dagger, but Smith's Script Dagger is actually really good. Not in PvP, but in PvE, I have soloed some of the hardest bosses in the game using just throwing daggers. So don't sleep on these. They're better than you think they are. They have S scaling and dexterity, which is massive dex scaling, plus a D scaling in strength, which means if you want to go 20 strength and like 60 dexterity or something, you can do that. It'll be very, very good. And every attack is a throw. If you're on a horseback, if you're on torrent and you're trying to use these daggers, it's all like throwing attacks. Everything is a throwing attack. So it's R1s are throws, R2s are throws, everything's a throw. Very good. I love the throwing daggers. Backhand blade. Obviously, the default backhand blade is just overperforming right now in the DLC for 2 pounds. It has S dexterity scaling, which is insane, plus D scaling and strength while having S scaling and dexterity, which is like never happens. Also very good with statuses, so poison, bleed, frostbite buildup, doesn't really matter. Backhand blades are just amazing no matter how you slice it, and the fact that they're only 2 pounds for being a dual wield weapon is ridiculous. Perfume bottles. So again, perfume bottles were fixed. They used to be bugged, so you could like one-shot people with them now. They actually function the way they're supposed to work. They have B scaling and dexterity, but given the fact that they deal pure elemental damage, the lower scaling is okay, because there's a lot of ways in the game that you can buff fire damage. You can pop a physic to increase fire damage. You can use the Fire Scorpion charm. Just a lot of ways to naturally increase fire damage. Flame Grant Me Strength is a buff that would work very well with this, so can't go wrong with the perfumes. Does a lot of great AoE damage. Beyond that, we have Beast Claws. I am going to go with the normal Beast Claws because they are infusible, which is really nice. Because the Beast Claws are naturally infusible, it's actually possible to have two status effects proccing on them at the same time. So, for example, you could poison the Beast Claws, so you're giving the opponent bleed buildup and poison buildup, or you could go Frostbite, and you're going to basically proc Frostbite and bleed at the same time, which is insanely powerful. But the Claws just naturally have like a very evasive and wild moveset as you kind of beast out on people, and they're good for that reason. Talking about light greatswords, I'm going to say Renala's twinblades are the best light greatsword, and this is the upgrade that I was talking about for Sword of Night and Flame. You can see that at plus 10, the Renala's twinblades have C scaling across the board. I think it's the only weapon in the game. Maybe Godskin Colossal Sword is like the God Slayer or whatever. It has scaling that is similar to this. But yeah, having C in all stats just means that you can go 30, 30, 30, 30, and it's going to put out a lot of damage on these dual wield swords. Also a very good weapon art. Putting out magic and fire damage, so again, very good weapon. The best Great Katana is the Dragon Slayer Great Katana. Has, you know, amazing quality scaling at CC, has bleed buildup, and it has one of the best weapon arts in the game, being a big anime, you know, slice. You jump up into the air and you put, you know, a blade of energy at the opponent. You throw a blade of energy at the opponent, and it deals huge damage. And it's very hard to deal with. Even just like solid R1 chains and things like that make this weapon deceivingly powerful. High poise damage, etc. So that's all the weapons I wanted to overview in this video. If you guys like this, instead of LOR content for a change, I can do a follow-up where I do more weapon highlights for each category. But I thought we'd give this a shot. This is Eternal King, signing out.